This just got very interesting for the New York Rangers, as one thing in particular has flown completely under the radar this offseason. We're going to break down exactly what that is and why it has major implications for this team and the roster heading into next season. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 77% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the New York Rangers, this channel is built for blue shirt fandom, and this is the place to be for all your daily New York Rangers content. But Bret, let's get right into it. There was one thing I was looking through a couple things yesterday, and I thought something really stood out to me. It's very weird. We'll get to it in a second, but this really plays into it too. And this is a poll from Forever Blue Shirt. So credit to them. They ran a poll on who should be the third line center heading into next season, because honestly, it should be a bigger question than any of us are making it out to be at this point, because if Mika does play center, who's going to play third line center? It can't be Mika making that much money. So the poll, Vincent Troche emerged as the favorite. Obviously, there was a couple guys behind him like Juuso Parson and Johnny Brodzinski. I want to get into those two in a second as well. And Mika Zibanejad was there too. But Vincent Troche won by a lot. So what do you make of that? Because I don't know if that's necessarily the answer. We touched on this in another video we did yesterday. But this is not only the weirdest thing about this whole situation, but what do you make of this?
Yeah, this is really interesting. Vincent Trocheck playing third line center. I did not expect him to win this poll, especially considering the last time the Rangers had real success, when they won the President's Trophy. A big part of that team, a big part of that identity was that line with Vincent Trocheck, Artemi Panarin, and Alexei Lafreniere. Let's not forget that the 2023-2024 season, Vincent Trocheck had the best year of his career, 77 points. Panarin 120 points, and Lafreniere also the best season we ever have seen from him with 57 points. That was just a dynamic line, and I understand last year, they took a step back, weren't as effective, but let's be real, the entire team took a step back aside from a few bright spots like a Will Cooley, for example, but there weren't many bright spots. A lot of players took a step back, and that line in 60 games together last season still outscored their opponents 36-28 when they were on the ice. So that is still a line that I believe has a ton of potential. And breaking up that line not only would affect, Trocheck, but it would affect Lafreniere as well. We want to see him get back on track. So I think this would have major implications on the team moving forward. And I don't want to break up that line of Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere.
Yeah, and they played well, like you said. Like, they looked well. It passed the eye test, right, last season. So, especially, well, at times, I guess, of course. But I think this is and does have major implications on the team. But the other thing, I was looking at possible third line center options, and it's interesting in this article that they mentioned Juuso Parson, because I was looking through, the depth charts. I was looking through Puckpedia. This team can't really make any more moves. They could probably sign, unless you really want to get right up against the cap, one more, league minimum deal if they really want to. But I'm looking at all these mock lineups. We touched on this in another video. People are making their own on Puckpedia. For some reason, I feel like I'm playing a game of whatever you want to call it. Where's Waldo, hide and seek, whatever it is. Where you can look at, the power play units, all of these things. I'm looking at the press box on Puckpedia. Where is Juuso Parson? They re-signed this guy just recently, just at the start of free agency, for $1.25 million, which is a significant increase to what he was making before when they acquired him at the trade deadline. He is a 24-year-old, 6'3", 212-pound player. Center, by the way. Center can play wing, but natural center. And they just signed him to a 2-year contract extension, and he's still an RFA at the end of this contract extension. I don't understand why more people aren't talking about this guy. I feel like he's definitely factored into the plans. He barely played last year, and they re-signed him to 1.25. You don't do that for no reason. He's definitely factoring into the plans here. I had him in my mock lineup. We touched on it at third line center. What do you make of this player, this situation, Bret? Because this just got really interesting. I don't know why I can't find this guy on anybody's depth charts, Puckpedia, the whole thing. I think that it's super weird.
Yeah, I was just scrolling through Puckpedia because when you told me, I couldn't believe it. But you wouldn't even know this guy is still in the league. I mean, you can't find him anywhere. And you did have him on that third line. And
Yep.
I mentioned it yesterday in a video. We spoke about it off air. that, if Yuso Parsonen could return to the way he played in 2022, 2023 in Nashville, solid production there. But he hasn't been consistent. We've seen a decline. We haven't seen the production be what it was a couple years ago. And this is a two-way forward, a big guy, 6'3", 212 pounds. He's reliable defensively, but like I said, that offensive production just hasn't been consistent. Even defensively, he hasn't been consistent, but he is known as a two-way forward. And if he could put it together, I mentioned Taylor Radish as well
Yep.
in 2022, 2023. If those two players in particular could produce the way they did just a few seasons ago, the Rangers will have much better odds at being a real contender in the Eastern Conference. But like I said, if you put Trocheck on that third line at center, things get really interesting because, it looks like Mika will shift back to wing where he played last season down the stretch and showed lots of flash. So, that second line gets really weird if Trocheck moves to third line because then you need a Othman, you need a Bret Berard, you
Yep.
need a Parsonen to really step up into that top six role. And even Parsonen at his best, I see as a bottom six forward. So things are going to get really interesting here for the Rangers, Darius.
Absolutely, yeah, and you could take a look at it here too. Like you mentioned, if he gets back to the production, at least offensively, that he had a couple seasons ago, again, is that likely? We don't necessarily know. It's a new team, and obviously he came into a bad situation. Let's not pretend like that it wasn't happening last year. So it is definitely possible. Like you said, a decent two-way player. And is he the most physical player? Not necessarily, but he has a big body and he can get to the net, right? So I feel like there is value. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. Again, if you look at his JFresh chart, nothing crazy. This was when he got traded to the New York Rangers. So again, I think it's just weird. I don't think that they signed this guy for nothing, right? $1.25 million, not to sit in the press box. Maybe some games, but I don't think that's the plan. You don't just sign guys like that or Taylor Rash for no reason or to not have them play in the NHL. So it's going to be interesting. Any final thoughts, Bret, on Yuso Parson in this whole situation with third line center? Because we talked about it in a video yesterday. I mean, I don't think the lineup is going to look close to what people think it is, and I feel like Zibanejad has to play the wing at this point.
Well, you made a great point earlier, Darius, that the Rangers didn't pay him for no reason. He is going to be a contributor on this Rangers team. And let's not forget, part of that Ryan Lindgren trade last year that, didn't show much production at all. But those last 3 games of the season, he did put up 5 points. So hopefully he could carry that momentum into this season. And the Rangers are going to need him to because, like I said, they're not paying him for no reason. And it looks like he's going to have to step up here, especially if Trocheck moves to the third line.
Absolutely. And I think that, he also had a great World Hockey Championships, which was encouraging as well. And like you said, put up some points there late in the season. So it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing with him. But one other thing I wanted to touch on is the NHL's best goalies was released by a certain model. I just wanted to touch on this because Shesterkin's still at the top where he should be. And I was very vocal all season, last season. I'm very, we barely touch on Shesterkin in videos together, Bret, but I'm curious for your thoughts. But Shesterkin to me is one of the best goalies in the league, if not the best goalie in the league. Like you're getting some help if you're Connor Hellebuck by a great team in front of him who won the President's Trophy last year. But he's still in third place here, at least according to this model. So what do you make of that? He's still a great goaltender. I'm excited to see what he's going to do next season with some competent defense pairings in front of him. What's your take on this?
Well, what really excites me about this upcoming season is it seems the Rangers are prioritizing players that are going to block shots, right? The Rangers have brought in quite a few players that may not be, the most physical in the world. Even a Gavrikov at his size and stature, he's not going to hit guys, like crazy. But what he will do, which can't go unnoticed, is he will block a ton of shots. Will Borgen will block shots. Scott Morrow will block shots. The Rangers need to make sure that Igor Shesterkin faces less shots than he did last year because it was just crazy. Even in that Florida series when they won the President's Trophy, excuse me, it felt like the Panthers were getting like 50 shots a game off on
Yeah.
Igor. So the Rangers really need, they improved their defense and now they need to make sure that Igor faces less shots than he did last season. He wasn't perfect last year. He gave up some easy goals. There were some moments where it's like, wow, how did he make that save? But, let it go right through the 5 hole, for something that he usually has no problem defending. But I'm really excited about the defense that improved, and I'm really excited about all the players they brought in that will block shots.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I think even a guy like Adam Fox, who has been on the roster, is underrated in that regard. I think he's eighth in the entire league in terms of defensemen blocking shots since 2021, I believe. So I like that. I like that they're prioritizing that. You bring up another good point with the goaltending where, last season there was a couple games I remember notably against the Detroit Red Wings when Jonathan Quick was in net, and the Ottawa Senators where Shesterkin was in net, and they somehow won those games. They were giving up over 50 shots, but you can't expect that out of your goaltenders every single night. It's not going to go that way. And when you have goaltenders that are overthinking things and making moves that are not necessarily what they want to do, or they're not comfortable doing them because the defense is so bad in front of them, I feel like that is going to have there is going to be a positive shift with that next season. So any final thoughts on everything we've covered today, Brett? Because I feel like this was another loaded one. There's a lot of question marks, I think, still heading into next season, and hopefully they're answered once we get closer to training camp.
Yeah, well, my final thought is something that I found real interesting right before we came on the air, which is that Trocheck has a history of playing third line center under Mike Sullivan, and it
Oh, yeah.
came for Team USA at the Four Nations face-off. And I forgot about that, but just reading about it before we did this video, that is something to keep an eye on, folks. Not only is Trocheck leading the poll from ForeverBlueShirts.com, but there is a track record there of Sullivan putting Trocheck on that third line. I personally think it would be a bad move, but you have to trust Sullivan, have to give him a chance to see if it works. Like I said, two-time Stanley Cup champion. So we'll see what happens, but at the end of the day, I think it's the wrong move.
I agree. I think it is the wrong move. And although it does lengthen your lineup per se, I guess, but Mika to me can't play defense at center anymore. So I don't think it actually does lengthen your lineup. But I feel like we all have to expect and make the peace with the fact that Mike Sullivan's going to come in and do some things that we're maybe not going to agree with at first. And we'll see how it plays out as the season goes on. But let us know how you feel in the comments, because the conversation always continues there. It continues on X. You can find us on X. The link is in the description. But let us know how you feel in the comments. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.